Woo! All right, let's buckle up because I put on my nicest, wrinkliest, beigest shirt. I'm actually all beiged out because this is either a sign of intelligence or of a total tool, and I'm willing to take that chance. We're talking Steve Jobs. Before we get any further, I just want to say, anybody who just immediately trolls or hates on this video because I'm talking about Apple, I get it, all right? Android versus Apple, blue bubble versus green bubble. I understand the criticisms and I understand why people are so heavy to defend this and talk about that. Don't plant flags on multi-million-dollar corporations because I think that's kind of stupid. Let's just buy products that work. And let's not just trash on them because they are the opposing brand. If product works, then that's the product you go with. And if it happens to be on this brand, then you jump ship, and then you jump ship, and that's how it should be. Products work for you. You do not work for the brand. Now that we've agreed on that, we're gonna move forward. Back to the movie. We're talking about Steve Jobs, directed by Danny Boyle, famous director of many classic hits, such as 2008's Slumdog Millionaire, 2010's 127 Hours, and we can talk about 2013's Trance, right? But then he went back to his highs with 2015's Steve Jobs. No, not that one. Thank you. Now, whenever I'm watching a biopic, I'm always a little hesitant because they can be a little deceptive. What I mean by that is a biopic is supposed to capture the essence of somebody or something that happened. It's not supposed to be your window into understanding them entirely, just capturing the essence of what it was or who they were. Right, because that's what makes it a biopic and not a documentary. I feel like a lot of times though with biopics, somebody who was related or closely related to the subject kind of wants to bottleneck any of the negative aspects of that individual or event. So they kind of gloss over things, or maybe they don't address it at all, and I don't know, it kind of creates this like near perfect picture of something that it really wasn't. That being said, there is also the flip side of the audience who goes in and then they walk out feeling like they know everything about the subject all of a sudden because they watch this movie. And that's not what it's supposed to be either. Again, capturing the essence, not teaching you every little detail. And those who know somebody best would probably tell you the movie is not your way of knowing them. The subject was already a little tricky as it is because in 2013, we had another Steve Jobs movie and Ashton Kutcher did okay. I mean, yeah, he did okay. But the movie itself kind of wanted to address all kinds of things, but didn't dive deep into anything. So by the end of it, it just kind of was a eh. This one, on the other hand, I knew was gonna at least be well made. The director was already proven to be a successful hit director with quality and box office. And the writer was a very exciting writer, Aaron Sorkin, coming out of things as The West Wing, The Newsroom, Moneyball, and The Social Network. So I knew technically I was in for a treat as far as a quality movie goes. Subject matter, I was just skeptical that this would turn into like an ego telling its own story kind of deal. Right away, I was wrong. The movie opens up with Steve Jobs, his developer Andy Hertzfeld, and his chief of marketing Joanna Hoffman. And they're locked in a crisis because minutes before an opening presentation for his latest Lisa computer, they run into a problem. A pretty big one. It won't say Apple's signature hello. Y'all hear that? And what made this such a great introduction is because right away we understand what made Steve Jobs great and what made him not so great. And the things that made him great were his ambitions, his vision, the idea that what he was doing wasn't just important, but it was beautiful. He didn't see the difference between art and technology, and to him it was all one and the same, and it should be one and the same. That being said, those who were working with him kind of found him to be very dismissive of anybody who got in that vision's way. He kind of stepped on and took credit for a lot along the way. It just seemed like it was hard to work with him, and maybe that's overstating it, maybe that's understating it, I don't know. But the movie presents this way right away. That made sense. So it shows that he seemingly wants to do the impossible by correcting this big error minutes before open house, but he also wants to ignore safety regulations with a total blackout, no exit signs, totally disregarding public safety because he has this ideal vision for how this presentation should go. He just wants to make a bigger impact than he was already gonna make, even without the complete blackout, even without the Lisa computer saying hello. If he was gonna do this, he was gonna do it right. according to him. Going into this and seeing this representation of Steve Jobs, I now feel like he is another human being I can resonate with. They address that he was imperfect, and that also means that when it does show why he was great, I am more inclined to believe why he was great, because it's not just an ego painting its own picture. I'm able to see the imperfections, and that raises what made him seemingly perfect. And it's a very honest movie. They get into his views on the consumer, they get into his views on the company Apple, they get into his views on computing. And two of the major things that they get into about Steve, and they're kind of the most personal, are a running theme of him being given up for adoption, tragically and unfortunately, more than once technically, and his acknowledgement of being Lisa's father. When it comes to that second one, right off the bat, I mean, he is very cold. He's very cold about just not, going out of his way to not acknowledge Lisa as his daughter and to not acknowledge Lisa's mother, Chrisanne, just unwilling to help and wants nothing to do with this. But these themes do present a through line where it doesn't really paint him as somebody who is just a be-all end-all villain throughout the whole movie. It also doesn't really paint him to be the ultimate redeemable character. It presents him as somewhere, in the middle. Complicated. The gray area, like most of us. For a movie, this presents a very, very interesting character to follow. Somebody that we can root for even though we disagree with them. We want them to get it right. And it's because of these two major themes that I am now able to empathize with somebody I have never met. And that's a good character study. For instance, that first encounter, we do get the very cold Steve Jobs, wants nothing to do with Lisa, but the very next scene where he goes right back in that room alone with Lisa and her mother, Chrisanne, he is suddenly infatuated by her potential based off of what she does with his Lisa computer. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but somebody who immediately had a hard stance and wants nothing to do with somebody to then flip minutes later and then have a bit of infatuation, almost a pride in what she is doing, that kind of shows that Steve Jobs was inconsistent with his views on this. He didn't know himself nearly as well as he knew Apple and computing. Another scene that comes to mind is later we see him finding Lisa up backstage where like the light fixtures are. And when he approaches her, he immediately asks, "Who are you hiding from, me or your mother?" And she seems pretty thrown off by the question, and it did come out of nowhere. But that scene and that question, that reaction, it wasn't really for Lisa to answer. That was just a glimpse into how Steve thinks Lisa must view him. Again, very interesting how he then goes out of his way to try and connect with her. He does. He asks her questions of what she's listening to. He has follow-up questions. He's nodding along. He's truly digging it all in with the attempt to connect with her, to understand her, just a little bit more than he thinks he does. And these efforts grow, and without getting too much into the ending, by the time you get there, you do get somebody who genuinely does care. Going from the very beginning to how he is at the very end. I'm not saying we should praise him for bare minimum shit, but what I am saying is that in this movie, we get a significantly grown character, and that character arc is very rewarding. Now, diving into what really stands out and makes this movie unique is that it doesn't have a traditional plot. So normally in a story, you get the beginning, middle, and the end, and throughout, things happen, twists and turns that kind of push the characters forward in the plot, and those are its plot points, is things that happen. In this movie, however, it revolves around relationships, those who knew him best. Individually, one-on-one, conversations are what pushes the story forward. Just like anything that Aaron Sorkin writes, this came out fantastic. I mean, it is a masterclass in writing. This is personally my favorite Aaron Sorkin script because throughout the entirety of the movie, you are getting these dramatic, epic conversations and debates and issues and arguments, and he does such a great job in forcing you to care and making you keep up with his pace. I mean, it is so rapid, quick. It kind of resembles more of a musical like Hamilton than anything else. With every witty remark, with every comeback, with every argument, with every word, with every phrase, with every cue, verbal and nonverbal, it just is such a fantastic script, and it's an amazing way of telling a story. In anyone else's hands, it's impressive. But in Aaron Sorkin's hands, it is just brilliant. And remember when I mentioned that the film was broken up into thirds? You remember, right? Right away, we understand what made Steve Jobs great and what made him not so great. And the movie's broken up into thirds. Well, the movie's broken up into thirds, but again, not your traditional beginning, middle, and end. it's actually revolving around 3 different Apple keynote presentations. So no, in reality, Steve didn't come to blows and have all of these dramatized conversations minutes before a keynote. But when you're taking these relationships and the span of 10, 15, maybe even 20 years worth of growth and connections, condense them down into 3 separate days where each one develops and furthers them, pretty impressive. And I was blown away by how well that works. And so now diving into those relationships, they again revolve around those who knew him best at the time. So we have Andy Hertzfeld, who was a developer at Apple and worked under Steve, but clearly had a lot more of an opinion about Steve than he may let on at first. He got pushed around quite a bit. Then we have Joanna Hoffman, who played as, yes, Apple's chief of marketing, but also almost like Steve's right-hand mind. I mean, she was always there to make sure that whatever Steve needed to get done, got done, even if Steve was in his own way. And that goes for his personal life too. She was always pushing for some hard truths that Steve just wouldn't acknowledge on his own. Then you have John Scully, who was Apple's CEO at the time, and he really took on like a fatherly role. And they addressed that right away, and they explore that throughout the movie. The second portion of the movie especially is like my favorite relationship moment throughout the entirety of the film. And then you have Steve Wozniak. You know, Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak starting Apple in a garage, that's Steve Wozniak. Even the real Wozniak has come out and said that this movie's representation, Michael Fassbender's portrayal of Steve Jobs, really captured who Steve was on the inside. Like, if that's not a glowing endorsement, I don't know what is. If anyone's gonna know Jobs better, it was probably gonna be Woz. And I'm allowed to call him Woz because I saw the movie. Now, he's also come out and mentioned that a lot of Wozniak's portrayal in the movie didn't actually happen, but he was still seemingly on board with his portrayal because of what it was they were addressing and how accurate that was. In an interview, quote, "Things that were in existence in the real world were put into my mouth. They were in the air, so you have to put them in someone's mouth to make a movie." And in a way, as an audience member, I really like it because it's almost like we get to see Steve Wozniak, who was getting completely undercut the entire movie. I mean, he just wasn't getting the credit he deserved, not nearly enough. He got to speak his mind, and that felt good as an audience member, seeing somebody step up and saying these things that we're kind of thinking too. And then also, this is me speaking out of turn, but personally, I also feel like it could have given Steve Wozniak a bit of a catharsis to it. It is kind of cool to see it portrayed in the movie, and I can't help but wonder if that feels just a little good, just a little right. So now that we understand the who in this movie that we're following, let's go back into those 3 different segments. So each one representing a keynote. The first keynote plays as our introduction to everybody listed already, and this is where we get to know them each and their relationship with Jobs individually. In the second one, we get that point of tension. This is where everything reaches its peak as far as the dramatization of it all. Verbal battles left and right, and Steve and John Scully actually have an entire conversation where half of it takes place in flashback while the other half takes place in present day. It is so amazing to watch, and you kind of feel like on the edge of your seat just because they're having a heated conversation. And the third keynote plays as an act of closure. Closure to the movie, obviously, but it also plays as closure to every single relationship that we have been following, and you get your satisfying conclusions to each and every one. And no, they don't really play as that perfect bow tie to where you understand this is it for that relationship, but it does show where the relationship stands going forward. It does a great job of addressing what's led us to that point and gives us some bit of closure each and every time. Even the quality of the camera used for the movie getting better with each and every keynote. Throughout the movie, each time Steve Jobs walks out to the stage to get his introduction, we are immediately cut off. Instead, it actually cuts into a transition segment showing what happens between each keynote leading to the next. So, when the end comes around and we do get that closing keynote, we get all the music, all the feelings, all the closures of each relationship leading up to that moment. We are finally given our introduction to Steve Jobs. And when we get that closing image of him, that crescendo of feelings and tone that comes from this movie, you just understand why he was such a polarizing and captivating character. Okay, that's it. All right, you're gonna be editor now. Good luck. So yeah, my final thoughts for this movie are kind of deceptive, as mentioned in the beginning of the video. I walk away feeling like I know Steve Jobs way more than I probably should. But that's a testament and a triumph to how well the movie was made, how beautifully it was performed by Michael Fassbender, how excellent it was directed by Danny Boyle, and how masterfully it was written by Aaron Sorkin. Because it's a masterclass in pacing and storytelling. Steve Jobs as a character is relatable and flawed, just like you and me. But here in this movie, all of his positive and negative traits feel so much grander to match his real world legacy. Like it or not, he helped shape the modern world that you and me are accustomed to today. So go out and see this one, please, if you just want to see an incredibly unique way to tell a story of an incredibly unique human. And that's all I got for you. I really appreciate you hearing me out. I know, again, my thoughts kind of go left and right throughout. Thank you for letting me compose them into a video, throw them out into the world, and hope that maybe 2 of you see it. That's good for me. I can live with that, for sure. Thank you. Subscribe and be ready, because I do got more lined up in the pocket. So thank you again for your time. Leave a like, comment down below what you think of the movie. Maybe you hate it, maybe you love it. I want to keep the discussion going as much as possible. And see you next time. Bye.